Hi and welcome to Comfort Dad Cooks. I'm very pleased that you're here. Today we're going to talk about chili. Now, for many people, chili means putting something like this or something like this in with ground meat. And certainly these are amazing hot sauces and I really enjoy them myself. But there's something about heat alone which doesn't add the same depth of flavor. It just adds a burn to the mouth and a keep the toilet paper in the fridge kind of thing. But today on Comfort Dad Cooks, I'm going to go back to 1983. This is my old recipe book, which I started then. And there's a recipe for chili in there. Now, at the time, it was a vegetarian chili, but I've adapted it over the years as I've started to love cooking with different kinds of meat, and I've hunted and I've also farmed, and so I'm going to be using some of the elk that I recently was able to hunt, and also some of the beef that I was able to rear on my property from cows. So we're going to be adding wild game and fresh organic beef to it. But we're also going to be looking at ways of increasing the flavor, not just the heat of the dish, but also layering different facets of flavor within the dish. And I'll be using spices, well, you'll see in just a few moments. So, on today's Comfort Dad Cooks, we're going to learn how to make my secret chili recipe. And I have won competitions with it locally, and it's been double blind tested against I think up to 14 chilies in one competition, and it won. Okay, so the first thing we're going to be doing is to make a sauce here from a few ingredients. Now, the first thing is I've got a few different kinds of chili in here. I'm taking some Mexican chili pods here, and these are actually Indian or Thai finger chilies, but they're dried, so a couple of those. And what I've done is I've soaked those in boiling water, about a cup of boiling water, until they're quite soft for about 20 minutes. So I'm going to put all that into a blender, okay? Then I'm going to take 3 fresh, these are serrano peppers, and drop those in there. Now, the trick with the basic raw heat of a chili is depending on what kind of chili you use. Now, I love the different kinds of chilies you can get from different parts of the world. You can dry roast them, you can get them fresh, you can roast them, tumble them around like they do in New Mexico, and create smoky chilies as well. But I'm using serranos here. If you want to increase the heat, you would use something more like a Scotch bonnet pepper, which is used very extensively in Caribbean cooking. If you want to go up to the ghost peppers, that's your own choice. But the way to add heat here is to add more chili, but also the specific kind of chili. So I'm comfortable with a serrano pepper. If you like your chili a little milder, you can use jalapenos. If you like it stronger, you can add something like Scotch bonnet. So we've got 3 fresh serrano peppers in there. We've got a couple of soaked dried Mexican chili peppers. These are quite mild. And then a couple of Thai finger chilies. We've got 1 onion, which I've just halved. And then, thanks to my eldest daughter, we now have some freshly peeled garlic. This is about 6 cloves of garlic. So we take all this in here, and then we're going to whiz it up first. So back in a moment. Okay, so you let that blitz up there for a couple of minutes, and you want something that's like quite a fine puree of your chilies and your onions in there. It smells really amazing. So we'll put that aside for just a moment. Okay, so what we'd like to do now is to start browning the meat. Now, what I like to do is after I brown the meat, I like to drain off any excess fat. So this is why I have this sieve and a pan here. So what we're going to do is take, first of all, a good glug of oil. A glug, a splash of, in this case, olive oil. Now we want to brown this meat, so we don't want to add too much at any one time. This is a pretty strong burner and a pretty large pan, so I would probably add this in 2 batches. And this is about a kilogram or about 2¼ pounds of meat. And as I say in this case, what I'm doing is I'm using half venison or elk and half beef. And you know, for many years now I've hunted, live in Oregon, some amazing hunting here. This was from an elk I hunted quite recently. And then I also keep my own cows, pigs, goats, sheep, depending on what season it is. And so we get meat all year round, and chickens as well. So this is a mixture of elk and beef. I like that mixture because the elk is quite lean and the beef adds a little fat to that. So anyway, you saute this until it's cooked, till it's brown. And we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. If during the process of sauteing, if you're using a very lean meat such as turkey, venison, ostrich, anything with a very low fat content, you can add another little bit of oil as you see fit. You want to be browning the meat here. We're not trying to steam the meat, otherwise it'll taste liverish. So you saute the meat, and as I'm doing in 2 batches here, we're going to drain it in this sieve to release any excess oil. And what you'll find is if you brown the meat first, you should always brown meat, irrespective of what you're cooking. In almost all cases, you should brown meat before you actually before you eat it. Not just cooking it, but browning it, because it creates such a different depth of flavor, and it builds the umami, the 6th taste in there, the savory, quote unquote, delicious taste, which is what we're looking for here. So bring that meat to nice saute there. It'll start to break up into different size chunks. That'll be fine. You want them to break up a little bit, and then just continue sauteing it. Pretty impressed with this burner here. I bought this for doing these shows. It puts out some pretty good heat. The house I'm in at the moment is an electric hob, and I do prefer the greater control from gas, so this is fantastic. Now we'll be cooking the meat together with the onions and the chilies and the garlic and all the other spices and secrets that we have today as part of this dish. So even if it were a little bit not completely cooked, we're not going to be eating it straight away, so we will start to take that out, and then we'll do that other batch and we'll be back in a moment or two. So now we've sauteed our meat, we're going to start sauteing our spices. So you start off with a fairly good glug of olive oil in here, and then what we're going to start doing is to start by sauteing cumin. Now cumin is widely used in many different cuisines, Mexican, Indian, in the North Africa, you name it, we use cumin everywhere. This is 3 tablespoons of cumin. We're going to get that in the pan there and saute that just for a few minutes, just to start releasing those delicious fragrances. It smells amazing in here now. Just get that cumin started, okay? Now we're going to start building up some flavors and layers of flavor here. So what we're going to do at this stage is to add in the onion, chili, garlic mix that we have. It can spit a little bit. Get a good facial. So that's our mixture there of onion and garlic, and then you're just going to cook that out for a couple of moments there. You don't want to be, you shouldn't have Vesuvius here. You shouldn't have the city of Pompeii terrified that this is about to roll down on them, but you should be getting a decent amount of heat on there, and then we're going to let that saute there for a couple of moments. Chili is so versatile. You can I've even, when I've been hiking, put it into a food flask, packed some pieces of cornbread in my backpack, and then stopped for a hot lunch, and it worked out really great. But you can serve this with, gosh, I've had it with everything. I mean, you think about rice and chili. You could have it in tacos. You could have it in burritos. You could put it on top of couscous or quinoa. You could have it with cornbread. There's so many different versatile ways to eat chili. So we start to just get the onions cooking away there, and that will take about 2 to 3 minutes, something like that. Now, as we start to cook out the onion here, it will tend to lose that oniony fragrance, and it will go towards a sweeter flavor. You'll know when it's just about turned. We turned the onion to the dark side. Okay, so cook out the onion garlic mixture there. Now what we're going to add here is a mixture of paprika and coriander. We'll put the ingredients in the description box below, but this is just regular sweet paprika that you might use in paprikash or a goulash or something like that. It's not spicy. The Iranian paprika is actually spicy, but this is the sweet version of paprika, and coriander, or cilantro, as we call it in the United States. Now you'll start to develop the layer of flavor there. Now, what we're going to add into here are smoked paprika, chili powder, oregano, or oregano if you prefer, cinnamon, and a few cloves. Now I talked about here about layering flavors, and certainly you may never have put many of these flavors in before, but trust me, this is an amazing chili, and you'll find that in addition to the heat of the chili, there's a great depth of flavor, a roundness of flavor. You feel that your mouth is being caressed, is the only way I can describe it. In addition to any heat that you'd like to add, this is an amazing meal. So start to cook that through. Now there's a debate about whether or not you should add beans to a chili. You can certainly, if you're a vegetarian, use beans and tofu and many different things. I know that if you live in Texas, there might be something sacrilegious about putting beans in it, in which case you can just add more meat. But I do like to add some beans. I think that they make a chili, but it's your personal preference. You could, if you wanted to as well, saute just before you put the onion, chili, garlic mixture in there. You could saute some peppers, some celery if you like celery. I like celery as a flavoring, almost treating it like an herb, but I don't like to add chunks of celery into this. So now you can start to see that what we're developing here is a very rich base to that chili which we're cooking here. So now what I like to do is to bring the meat back into the show and put that inside the dish here. So that's the meat in. And then just stir that around for a moment. That meat starts to take on that delicious flavor that you've built there. Now, if you are going to add beans, red kidney beans, this is about 1.5 to 2 cans, but I'll put the actual measurements in the description below. You kind of have to guess it. See how it looks according to your taste preferences. Is that going to be enough beans? For me, it's probably about enough there. So we didn't quite use all the beans we had. But, you know, with baking, and I always like to think of it as a chemical experiment, because you've got some exact things that you're trying to do. For example, in the case of bread or pizza dough, you're trying to work with flour to create a loaf or a pizza. You're trying to use exact quantities of yeast and develop gluten in certain ways. And with baking, when you're baking a cake, it's very important that you get the ingredients measured. So that's why I always recommend that you have a measuring scale. But with savory dishes, it's a different thing. You have to go by the feel, really. So you have to trust your feelings. And that's what we're doing here. I think that that is starting to look fantastic. Now I'm going to add a can of tomatoes here into that. And again, I think that you can get away with probably 1 can of tomatoes here. And the other thing you can do, of course, is to just rinse out the tomato can with a little bit of water. Put that in there. We don't want to waste any ingredients, any flavors. Now that starts to look more like a chili you may recognize. However, we're going to add one more ingredient here, which you've probably never added to a chili. This is organic cocoa powder, although you could just use regular cocoa powder. Now it's baking cocoa, it's not hot drinking chocolate, so you're not adding a bunch of sugar and things in here. There are a number of recipes in Mexican cooking that call for the use of cocoa. There's a specific area in Mexico called Oaxaca, where they make Oaxaca black mole sauce, and there are about 32 different ingredients in this. But I have found that a little bit of cocoa powder adds a certain depth to the chili that people are not sure what gives it that depth, but it's so wonderful. So again, trust me on this. The way to add the cocoa to the dish, if you throw it in just in as a powder, what you'll find is that you end up with lumps, which we don't want. So on this one, we're going to just make a paste, rather like you would with corn flour, although cocoa is even more temperamental and unforgiving than corn flour. So you make the cocoa into a paste, and then we are going to add that cocoa into the dish. There we go. I'm sure that if we had a pestle and mortar, we could grind it even more effectively. If you're wearing a white shirt to cook this and it's not covered in stuff already, just wait, the cocoa will get you. But now we've some amazing flavors starting to develop here inside this chili. And you can go even one step further. You can pick 4 or 5, 6 different kinds of chilies, hot, sweet, fragrant. There are so many different kinds of chili. You can, as I've already said, you can dry roast them. You can use them fresh. You can use them dried. When you dry chilies, it tends to increase the heat. But okay, so let's get the cocoa in there. Now, we're looking to develop and build many layers of flavor here. And what we're going to do here is to bring this chili up to a simmer and then just let it cook slowly. Leave it about 20 minutes, taste it, see what you think. And if you think it needs salt, you can always add salt. If you think it needs additional chili powder, you could do that. What I would do if you're adding any more spices or herbs to this is I would take out some of the chili that you've already made into a small bowl, and rather like I just did with the cocoa powder there, and like I've done with corn flour on the clam chowder episode that I did, make a paste. So you take the chili that you've cooked and you add spices to it, and then you make a paste in the bowl, and then you gradually add that in. That's the best way to add additional spices and herbs if you want to. So we want to take that down to the lowest light, just a few occasional bubbles, and let it simmer with the lid on. By the way, there's an interesting trick. If you want to hear whether a pan is bubbling and you don't want to take the lid off, you can take a metal or a wooden spoon, put it to the lid of the pan, and then if you put your ear onto the end of the spoon, you can hear the bubbles coming in the pan. It's a pretty interesting trick. So turn it down to the lowest heat, and then we'll be back in about 20 minutes. Okay, welcome back, and now it's about 20 minutes, and we're just going to open the pan and see how our chili's looking. It'll be steamy, so be careful you don't burn yourself. This is a cast iron. You can use enameled cast iron. One thing you've got to watch for with cast iron is that it's well seasoned. And I don't mean salt and pepper, I mean oil. You can even bake it in the oven to cover the little pores in the iron so that the iron is not so susceptible to the tomatoes which you've put in it, because tomatoes are acidic and they tend to attack the iron. So we recommend in cooking never to put tomatoes in cast iron pans unless it's an enameled cast iron. So what we have here is an amazing chili. Now I'm going to just try it here to see what I think of it. It smells amazing. You should always try the food before you serve it. Oh, that's really good. Okay, so that's ready to serve. What we have here is some plain white rice, and then we're going to turn the heat off this. Now I've made a fairly large portion here. This would feed easily a family of 4, but you can just double up the proportions and make it for game night if you like your football. So we're going to put the chili in the middle here. Now, that looks amazing. And what we're going to do here is add a little bit of sour cream on top, because it has a kick to it and a bit of sour cream is really nice. So, what we have here is chili con carne. Con carne means with meat. If it was a vegetarian, you could call it chili sin carne, I suppose. And then we're going to try this with the rice and with the sour cream. And I think you'll be so delighted with this. Now, you don't have to tell everyone that you've put cinnamon and cocoa and stuff in it, different kinds of chilies. You can make this and people will love it. It's an absolutely wonderful, well-layered flavor chili. And you can vary the heat infinitely from quite mild by using a mild pepper, such as a jalapeno, up to as hot as you want to go. So good. The layers of flavor, the roundness of the flavor, the heat is certainly there. The sour cream and the rice add a very nice neutral edge to that chili. It's absolutely beautiful, very delicious. So I encourage you to try this yourself at home. Vary the chili. Now you know that you can add spices and herbs of a wide variety to these types of dishes. I encourage you to add additional spices and herbs. See how it is if you leave out the oregano, or if you add more, or if you use fresh chopped sage or something. The goal of this is to experiment and to start opening up new avenues of flavor, new expressions of flavor, and new depths of flavor for you. So thank you for joining me on Comfort Dad Cooks today, and bon appetit.